Club. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for connecting to this interview. I'm actually very honored to have Dr. Piero Ferrucci with us today. He is a psychotherapist and has many books that he has written. I'll just let you know some of the books that he's written, like What We May Be, The Power of Kindness, Beauty and the Soul, Inevitable Grace, What Our Children Teach Us, Your Inner Will, and he's also co-authored some other books. He also trained with Roberto Assagioli in psychosynthesis, and I imagine all his teachings and all the wonderful experiences that he shared with us in his webpage about connecting with Roberto Assagioli are part of all his life and his work. So that's why it is an honor to have him here today. And if anybody has questions, please just write them down in the Facebook, or we're going to try to answer your questions, and otherwise you will ask them in our Facebook Live or the YouTube channel when we upload it to your YouTube, and we'll see what we can do for you. So I, first of all, I'd like to welcome Piero to this interview. And we're going to start like from scratch, because I know many people do not know what psychosynthesis is. So what I would like to start with, Piero, is to ask you what psychosynthesis is, and in what way this approach to our psyche, psychosynthesis, can help us discover who we truly are.
Oh, that's a big order. By the way, thank you for your kind words, and hello to everybody. It's afternoon there.
Yeah, 2 p.m.
So, good afternoon, everybody. And um, psychosynthesis is a system. It's a school that was started by an Italian psychiatrist quite a long time ago, actually. Beginning of last century, but he still has quite a following in Italy. He was the first to bring psychoanalysis to Italy at the beginning of last century. But then he grew dissatisfied of psychoanalysis because it was too much interested in just only pathology, only the darker side of the human being. And Massagioli was interested also in the human potentialities, the potential to love, to have insight, to develop your intelligence, to have good relationship with other people, and to be creative. And of course, we all have obstacles and difficulties in our life. And psychosynthesis is about finding ways of overcoming those obstacles, of changing the way we think, and changing the way we frame the world. And many people find that it works. So that's why it still exists, and it has quite a few people that follow it. It can become a form of psychotherapy, but actually you can call it psychotherapy only when it's too late, when the damage has been done already. It's actually a form of education, of self-education also, because it's full of exercises that one can do. And if you do the exercise, it's like a form of, how could I say, a psychological gym where you work. And if you work, then your workout will give you results. You will feel stronger, you'll feel more alert, you may feel better, You may learn how to have better relationships with others. There are many possibilities.
Mm. So you mentioned about changing the frames, I guess the frame of our mentality. Would-
Yes.
If it's about changing the frame of our mentality, it would reflect that there is something not quite functional in the way we have learned to live life in this world. Otherwise, also this world would not be so chaotic as it is right now in general. So um, how have you find that how easy or how difficult it is for people to actually change their frames of mentality? You know, we are so stuck in creating and recreating a reality based on the thoughts and the conditioning that we have had, and we identify with the conditioning. We believe that we are what we are conditioned to be. So how difficult have you found to for people to be able to change those frameworks and connect more with the spiritual self or the transpersonal self?
Well, it varies very much because people are very different. When a person comes to me, I have to start all over again, like a beginner, because everybody's different. So I have to devise a way to be with that person. And there are people that are very flexible and open, and they're quick learners. And it's easy and good to work with them. And there are people instead that they're more resistant. They are not only stuck in their ways, but even it's a strange thing, but many people are seem to be attached to suffering because in a way suffering that their suffering is something that they know and they prefer that to try something new. And the idea of course is to first of all, if a person comes to me, one of the first things I do is to find out how these wounds have happened. We all have wounds. Some of us have very grave wounds. Some of us know, but still we have traces from the past. As you yourself said a moment ago, what we have learned in the past in some way conditions us. If I have been ridiculed when I was a child at school, say, I will keep fearing being ridiculed. So when I find myself with other people, I will expect the same thing, even though I may not be aware of that. But that is what I learned. We learn from our experiences. Sometimes our experiences are bad, and so we keep uh, repeating the same pattern. The idea is to, first of all, find out what happened, because many of us are carrying a big load of past suffering that is still there. They're tears that need to be cried and they need to be expressed in some way. My teacher, Sajoli, used to ask people to write their autobiography, and it was a very good idea. And years later, they have found experimentally that emotional writing, that is, writing about your feelings, about what the experience that have happened in your life, even on your own, without showing it to anybody, but just free writing is a very effective technique for going beyond the wounds and the traumas that we have received. We all have experiences that we haven't quite put the finger on. And this has been shown also by neuroscience that if we give a name to our suffering and if we put it on in writing, it's sometimes somehow it becomes much easier to manage, and that would be, I would say, the first stage to see how we are, the kind of stuff that we are made of, because many people take very little time to look inside themselves. They know very little about themselves, especially in these times which are very extroverted. We all tend to look outside and instead of looking inwards. But it should be balanced. It's okay to look outside and to relate to other people, but it's very important for us to visit the inner worlds, because the inner worlds are like doing an interplanetary um, voyage. They are immense. We all look like different people, but inside us there is so much stuff. There is so much material. Some of it is painful. Some of it is wonderful. The image that we use in psychosynthesis is that of the house. We imagine living in a house with many different stories, and we live in the first story, and that's where life takes place. There's a kitchen, there's a bedroom, and so on and so on. But maybe we never gonna know. We never go in underground, and underground. What's in the underground? There may be some good wine, or some the rats and the beetles. Who knows? We have to go and find out. We still have to go and look, and then we can go to the higher stories, and maybe we can find a terrace from which we can see the stars, and we can see rainbows, and we can see distant landscapes that we never had an inkling of, because we always lived in that only in that place, in the first level of the house. But there are many different levels that we can go to. So it's a matter of expanding our awareness.
So you mentioned, like, when we have these traumas when we were a child, or we were ridiculed, like you mentioned, and we were bullied, or whatever experience we could have had when we were a child, and we grew up with that idea of a very low self-esteem. Do you believe it is possible to heal it, to actually heal it completely? Uh,
Definitely so. Sorry,
it is.
go ahead.
All the bad experiences we have had when we were children, or even when we grow older, everything can be overcome.
Uh, Definitely yes. There will be left always a scar, but so there is some kind of memory that something bad happened. But when we have those those incidents, it's not only a matter of having a painful experience, of being bullied, for instance, or being badly treated by a parent, or being insulted, or being told that we are bad or stupid, or we are unworthy, and all the kind of insults that unfortunately we may have heard in childhood, or even graver abuse, physical abuse and sexual abuse, and all kinds of abuse that leave a terrible trace in any human being that has suffered from it. We can definitely overcome that kind of trauma. We have to go, in a way, we have to go back where it hurts. This can be Mainly, it should, especially if the trauma has been very bad, it should be done with a professional, with a therapist. But one can work on it also on one's own, and that is by writing about it. Writing about is a very safe and effective technique that one can use, and it's. I'll give you an example. Um, this is a research that has been done in America. There was a group of people. This was grown-up people that were uh, sent away from their job, um, being made redundant. They were fired, and of course, that's a trauma when you lose your job and you don't have anything, any way of earning a living. You feel that you're in trouble, you feel betrayed, you feel angry. So they asked half of this group of people to write about their experiences, to write about their feelings. How did they experience this whole thing? How did they feel? How did they manage? Who they were angry about? And um, what were their fears and fantasies? And what would they do? And they were asked to write not very much, about once a week, write their emotions. That was half of a group. And they asked also the other half of the group um, not to write anything. The other uh, half of the group just went on living as they were living at that time. And then they visited all the people in both groups. And what had happened meanwhile was that most of the people in the first group, the one that had been writing, were able to find a job because they had gone around and asked. Whereas all the people in the second group, the ones that had not been writing, did not find any job. And that's not any magic. It's just that the people who had not been writing were still locked in their anger, in their despair and depression. Whereas the first group who had been writing about their experience, they had not only expressed their feelings and recognized their feelings, but they had in some way brought some order in some sense in their inner life. So they were free of that incident and much more available to go out and find a new job. And this is what they did. So basically, dealing with past trauma in one way or another frees us to move forward and have new experiences, which is what life is all about.
Yeah, but many people don't want to face that pain because it hurts very much.
Yes,
So suffering is a very deep experience of our humanity, but most of us, if not all, we don't want it, we don't like it. So when we have to face something that was very traumatic, how would you go about facing it?
yes,
Because people,
that's a very good question. Well, it's counterintuitive. It's against our thinking that we have to go more into the pain in order to be free from it. But I'll tell you something that happened recently to me. There was a screw that I screwed in too tightly, and I was not able to unscrew it. And I kept trying and trying, and it didn't work. So I brought it to a friend of mine. You know what he did? He took a hammer and he just gave it a little hit and hammered it more in instead of more out. And then it was much easier to unscrew it. in some way we have, sometimes we have to do the opposite of what we think may be the best thing. We suffer and therefore we want to run away from suffering. And what do? We just go out, we go to the movie, we try to distract ourselves, we go in the internet, or we drink or we smoke or whatever. We do anything that alleviates the pain, but that's the on the surface, the pain, the psychological pain, stay there as long as we don't face it. Now, you are right to say that it's difficult and painful to face it. And so for some people, it's better to do it little by little, and with a professional that's compassionate enough, because then you can do other things. You can meditate, you can exercise, you can visualize. There are many exercises, both in psychosynthesis and in, there are so many different schools and ways that one can only choose. For instance, I've written a book recently on beauty, because so little attention is given to beauty by psychologists, and yet it's incredibly important. Um, we don't think much of beauty, and yet, if I ask people what happens when you have a beautiful experience, and if they just have to uh, talk about it, they will animate. You can see light in their eyes, and their breathing changes, and you can see that there are bodily changes in their whole organism, because beauty has this extraordinary effect on us. Seeing a beautiful face, or seeing a beautiful landscape, or seeing a beautiful movie, or reading a beautiful poem, uh, or seeing a tree, even looking at the tree already changes our being out in nature, of course, or listening to the sea. I think you have quite a bit of sea in the Ecuador, don't you?
Mhm.
Actually, ocean.
Yes, yes, a lot.
Do you have a lot of nature where
Very.
you can go to?
We have the Amazon rainforest, we have the ocean, we have the mountains. Small country with diverse
Oh,
sceneries.
it must be beautiful. So the point is that for a long time, we humans, in the course of our evolution, we have lived, of course, life was not easy, but we lived in touch with nature all the time. Every night we would see the stars, unless it was cloudy, but otherwise we would see the starry sky. But many people in the big cities don't see the stars. Maybe you can see them more easily in Ecuador, but um, our contact with the raw elements of nature, with the tree, with the ocean, with the Amazon forest, with the stars, is limited often. And that is for the first time in, let's say, in the past 100, 150 years, this has happened. Because before we were much more in touch. And I'm sure this produces some kind of depression. Many people are depressed because they lack nature and they lack beauty. And not only the beauty of nature, but the beauty of art, the beauty of music, for instance. So I asked people, what is beautiful for you? And they knew it, but then we forget. And sometimes we feel that we don't deserve to experience beauty.
Mhm.
And yet, it's one of the easiest way to heal.
So this brings me to ask you, what is our nature as humans? What is our true nature? Since we can feel so good with some things and then sort of like with beauty, I see the stars or I see the mountains or a beautiful animal or a tree and I feel this awe or this happiness inside. And can I then think that that's part of my nature? Or when I see sadness and pain and then I don't like that and I feel very hurtful or suffering, is that part of my nature? Why in my nature there are things that make me feel good and things that make me feel bad? How can I know what my true nature is when I have these things? We live in duality, but we always look for something to feel good. We are looking. So but I would like to go in as much as depth as possible into our nature as humans, or maybe say spirits having a human
Mhm.
experience, because we have those experiences, very polar experiences, but I identify with the good ones and I don't like the other ones. I don't want to have them. So would the tendency to have the good feeling in the nice things speak about my nature, or what
Mm.
is this?
Yes. Well, I think our nature is all of what you've said, that so many experiences are possible to us, and we human beings are capable of the most cruel and ugly behaviors. And at the same time, we are also capable of noble behavior and noble attitudes of love, of creativity, of generosity, of empathy. We are equipped for all of this. Up to a few decades ago, scientists thought that we are, that beneath a thin veneer of civilization, we are all um, aggressive and selfish, and we try to overcome each other. And the only way for me to be well is to prevail on you. But this is not so at all, because now we know that life is very different. Humanity is very different. We have evolved, and we have, that how long the human evolution is, and so far we're still here, and we were able to survive, and we were able to survive because we cooperated with each other and we supported each other. There is a lot of evidence for that, that people in Paleolithic times, they were supporting each other and they were nourishing each other, not only their family, but the children of other families, and that we are a most collaborative species. So, of course, we are also able of cruelty and of aggressiveness and violence. So our nature is very wide, and the best way to know ourselves is to realize this. In my school, we talk about the sub-personalities, that we are a, we're made of a crowd of different people. And if you think of the people you know, you will notice that this is true, that one day you meet somebody and he is very friendly and open and easy, and the next day you meet him and he is suspicious, and maybe he doesn't want to talk with you. And then the next day he's different still. He That day he is kind maybe, but he's you can see that he's interested in making money, for instance. And then another day you see him again and you find that he is very anxious, and so on and so on. That we are made of little people. You can see it as little people living inside us, and we alternate. And a good way of understanding ourselves is to make an inventory of all the different subpersonalities that we have inside, because then at any time we can ask ourselves, what subpersonality am I in at this time? And if we study, you laugh.
I have so many questions actually. This is
go
so
ahead with the Go ahead with your questions.
okay about the subpersonalities.
Uh-huh.
Uh, what crosses my mind right now is what what's the relationship between these subpersonalities and past lives? Because I know Asajoli was very fond of spirituality, and we will go later on maybe to the transpersonal self, but it just dawned on me that if we believe in reincarnation, or we are reborn, as the Buddhists would say, uh, maybe the subpersonalities have to do with who we were in different lifetimes. Uh, I don't remember when I was studying psychosynthesis. I don't remember there was a link between past lives and subpersonalities, but has anybody come across with that possibility?
Well, of course, that thought comes to some people because many people feel that there is some kind of past within us. We don't know if it's past lives or if it is the collective psyche that is made up with so many experiences, and those experiences of all of humanity are within us. Now, I must tell you that yes, you're right that Asdoli was very interested in esotericism and he believed in past lives. I happen to believe in it too, but that's apart from psychosynthesis. You're free not to, it's not a, a religion. You're free not to think that there are past lives, and subpersonalities can be explained very easily in terms of this life. And the important thing is to understand who they are and how they work and how they may dominate. For instance, an anxious personality may make me very anxious all the time and may dominate me. And when I'm in that personality, I see the whole world as a threatening place. And at other times, I see the world as some a place where I can have a great time, and I can have fun. Of course, all of this may come from past lives. I don't know, that is some kind of religious question, and psychosynthesis starts well before that. It brings people to the threshold of the mystery, but there it stops because everybody has to decide on their own. But for the purposes of well-being, we don't have to know where the personalities came, if they came from past lives. The important thing is that they don't control us.
So how do we go about uh, not letting subpersonalities control us? Because in one way we would have to disidentify or become a center of observation in
Ah,
order
I
to
can
see how
see
they
that
work.
you've already learned some lessons.
Well, psychosynthesis has been in my life for already a long time. And
Ah, I
you know,
see.
I practice psychosynthesis, but I
Wonderful.
studied with Tony Brooks and Philip Brooks that I was mentioning you before, and
Yes.
John Firman was part of the training as well. So uh, it has. I have been able to learn very much from the psychosynthesis,
Ah, wonderful.
uh, and when I think of the observer, which is part of that, I also think about
Yes.
Krishnamurti, who was very um, insistent in talking about the observer, and so it kind of uh, mingles with Eastern philosophies, or just with connecting with the inner self, which I would very much like to talk about the inner world, which is so extremely different from
Oh,
the outer
definitely.
world.
Definitely. Now, we're coming to the maybe the most important point, which I think is what you have in mind, that Assagioli's idea was that of all the parts that make us up, there is one that he calls the self that remains always the same. That is, when I say I'm still the same I that I was many years ago, even though everything has changed. All the cells in my brain and my body have changed. I am evident, my body is evidently different. I've gone through many different experiences. Still, I say and then when I go to bed and then tomorrow morning I wake up, I'm still and I connect to what I was yesterday night, and so on and so on. So, what is this I or this self? According to Assagioli, is that part of us that not only remains the same, but is not affected by the flux of our feelings and of our ideas. So, whatever happens, um, the self remains the same. However, the self may start to believe that it is all those feelings and all that is happening, all the subpersonalities, and that is like a dream or like a cauchemar, like a nightmare. Um, but the idea, as you said, is to disidentify, to step back and to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not that subpersonality, I'm not that subpersonality, I am. Just to experience pure being, and that experience of pure being is what we call the self. And the self is unchanging. Nothing can hurt it. You can put it this way: imagine that there is a house, and that house occupies a space, and that house is destroyed. But what happened to the space that the house was in? Nothing happened. And it's the same thing with the self. We go through many different experiences, difficulties, joys, despair, success, failure, young age, old age, but the self is always there. And it's a good thing to remember as we're getting old. So many people are horrified about getting old. They experience their body becoming older and weaker, but there is a part in us that is not old and is not young, but that just is, and finding it again within us. You like it. I can see it from your face. Yes, exactly. It gives a lot of relief. and we don't have to prove anything anymore. We just are. And in that self, there is no time, because what frighten, frightens us is the passage of time. That time goes on and on and on and on and on, and it never stops, and we become old, and then we die, and we are all scared of that. But that part of us is just there, it just is.
So,
And
so what's
yes.
the relationship between this self that is there always, it's the one self, and the soul? What is that relationship or the differences between the soul and the self?
Well, some people call the self the soul, but it's really the same thing.
Mhm.
Some people
So,
call it.
the I was just not using psychosynthesis words to make it more general, but the relationship between the lower self and the higher self, um, they are one, but one is lower and the other one's higher. So I can see myself as me, as a personality with my way of existence that I identify with and that I call I. But I also have that part of me which is transcendent, which is that I definitely know as a higher self, as the soul that brings me all the insights, that brings me all the information that suddenly appears when I'm most of my time in my little self, right? Living in this life with my eyes towards the external world. Whenever I give myself time to go inside, I connect with the inner self, which is a very different world from the outer world. And there are times where this higher self, what many people don't even uh, acknowledge or can discern between the lower and the higher self, but uh, the idea is okay, there is this higher self,
Mhm.
transpersonal
Well,
self.
in our outlook, there are no two selves. There is one self, but
Okay.
the self can uh, become forgetful of what it is. We forget who we are because we are taken in this hypnosis, which is our life, and we think that we are this body, and we think that we are this feeling of happiness or this feeling of despair. But all of that keeps changing. But whoever is experiencing that is not changing. So we can learn to detach, to step back little by little. The neuroscientists have found also that when we are in deep, stressful emotions, especially emotion of fear or emotion of rage, there is a part in our brain called the amygdala, which is an older part of the brain. And if we are able to step back and look from the outside at that rage or that fear, then we are activating a newer and more evolved part of our brain, which is in the cortex. And so it makes sense also in terms of neuroscience. But the point that you were making is extremely important, because the more we are able to detach and disidentify from our experience, and the more we find this center of pure being, the easier it is to see ourselves as the self with a capital S.
Now,
Uh, yes,
you said that this I
yes.
is never changing. It's not changing. It's always the presence of I is not changing. Yet we live in a dimension. This third dimension is always changing. We live in duality, and there is a phrase that says change is the only constant. That is, everything is
Mhm.
changing except the fact that everything is changing. And this is a not changing presence. I wonder, when you mentioned that this is a not changing presence, if this presence is multidimensional, that doesn't belong to the third dimension where everything is
Uh-huh.
changing all the time. If it's a higher dimension where there is unity, where there is beyond duality, is this presence of I there?
Yes, well, we've all been brought up, especially I think in Catholic countries, we've been brought up of thinking of eternity as time going on and on and on forever. Um, and that is eternity. And then you go to hell or to heaven uh, according to how you behaved, and that is forever, which is actually a very worrying thought if you think about it. You can go into a good place forever and ever and ever, and it will never stop. I don't know if am so, if I would be so happy about it, but the point is that eternity is going beyond time, is not something that goes on forever, but a time that does not exist anymore. At least is not experienced in the way in which we experience. But if you ask a group of people, have you ever experienced time to stop? Uh, have you ever experienced a state of timelessness when you were not aware the time was going on? And many people will say yes. And sometimes is when they're in love, or sometimes when they are with a group of people and maybe friends, and they keep talking with each other, and they have a good time. And time seems to not exist. And then they look at the watch and they say, "Oh, so how how much time has gone by?" And maybe it's when you were listening to music and you were so enraptured in music that you time stopped. Didn't think of oh, what do I have to do now and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and look at my face, I'm getting old, and all the kinds of thoughts that we have. And that is a taste of timelessness. There is a condition of the human being which is beyond time. People, especially American people coming to visit us at Jolly, uh, would ask him, "Well, how old are you?" And he would answer, "My body is 85 years old." And they thought he was making a grammar mistake because they thought he was not very good in his English, but he would answer that they were making a psychological and a mistake of psychological grammar, because the I is not 85 years old. The I is timeless. The body is in time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, of course, it changes all the time, but there is a part of us that is beyond time. And we may not know it, but sometimes maybe when we meditate, um, we may experience it.
So what comes to mind when you talk about this is like I'm remembering me as a child and the idea I had of an I. As a child, I have a childish I, a child that just a child. But as I grow older and mature and I connect with my inner self, my sense of I changes. Maybe You see, when I was a child, I didn't think about the I. I was just I was just a child. I never thought about I had to have an identity. I was just
Yes, yes,
being
of course.
myself.
Yes,
But as we grow older, we identify with who we think we are. And then when we wake up, maybe we start uh, trying to find out who we truly are. And, uh, and this I seems to be the essence of our existence, to connect with this I. So
yes.
meditation is one way of connecting with that I. Are there any other ways of connecting and recognizing this I? Because uh, when most people say I, they are talking about the conditioned idea of who they think they are. But there is a difference between who most people think they are and their true nature or their true self, which would be this I.
Uh-huh. Well, I can tell you've been very well trained in psychosynthesis. That's I totally agree with you that um, most of us are so identified with the experience. So if I am in love, for instance, at that moment I am in love and I have to see my beloved. And then a moment later I get some bad news, I'm very upset. And then a moment later I get a headache. And so the headache is all there is. And most of us are identified with their experience all the time, and they are um, not conscious that there is something else. There is a dimension that is unchangeable and that is always there and that watches all this development, but does not belong to it and is not even influenced by it. That is just being, and it's like a sanctuary. It's like going back home again. Now imagine if you have to go back home in real life and you don't find it anymore. Where's home? You think you're going home, but it's not here, it's not there, it's not there. Where's my home? And that's very distressing. Now, I think most people, psychologically speaking, are like that they don't know where their home is. They feel a longing to go back home, to find a place in themselves in which where they feel that they are there. Then now I am me. Now I am at home. Now I just am. And that is extremely reassuring. Otherwise, we live all our lives as if home did not exist.
Numb. I see people living in a very strong numbness. That's my feeling, It's like we are hypnotized to live in a world always to the outside. And what I have found out is that there's a lot of people that are afraid of looking inside, maybe because there's a lot of pain that they have
Yes,
to
well,
go through.
numbness is a way of trying to stop the pain, isn't it?
Mhm.
And many times people that are numb are just feeling paralyzed by the fear of experiencing that pain.
Mhm.
And deep down, there is a flow of strong feelings that needs to be, we need to get in touch with it again. We
Now,
need to,
I think everybody wants to be self-actualized, self-realized, or find some sort of happiness. What what would be now that for the first time in the whole interview, we're going to tap into the title of the interview.
Yes, yes. Well,
So
we built up to it, huh?
yeah, how can we, what is the way to go um to become happy? I mean, is it we always have to go inside to be self-realized, or we don't need to go inside to be self-realized? What is your
Well,
feeling?
luckily, we are all different. So there are many ways, not just in psychosynthesis, but in many traditions. For instance, yoga talks about different ways: the way of action, the way of the way of meditation, the way of devotion, and so also in psychosynthesis, there are many different ways to the self, to self-realization. One is the way of meditation, but not every person um, is interested in meditation. Some people instead are more drawn to action, and there is a way of action, especially the way of service, a way of being active and putting that action to a good purpose that is beyond my selfish world. There is a way of beauty. We spoke before about how beauty can help us transcend the way in which we usually think and behave. There is a way of devotion, especially people who are religious, but not only, that they find that being devoted to a value or to a divine being that is beyond them helps them transcend, go beyond their selfish world. There is a way of science and of knowing and understanding. I wrote a book on all these ways called Inevitable Grace. You mentioned it before, has been translated in Spanish also. And so there's a way of science, because science can help in this way to the self. Science is about understanding, it's about persevering, it's about being full of wonder also. And there is a way of the will, there is the way, did I mention them all? There is the way of dance. Many people find that they can reach the self through the body, by using the body in specific ways, and dancing is a wonderful way of transcending. There is a way of ritual as well. People find that rituals bring them beyond their everyday reality. So different people have different ways, and the ways are very different. But it's like they're different paths to the same top of the same mountain.
Now, talking about the what's going on in the planet, in the world today, everything is so many shifts and so many intense experiences, as if it seems, as if humans have not heard their call to connect with their own nature, and nature is coming onto us very strong, with all ecological problems, but not only that. I mean, it's just things that we have created. And it would seem like, I really admire Krishnamurti. He had a phrase that he said that it was not healthy or it was not intelligent to be adapted to a very dysfunctional world. That it seems that we've been living in dysfunctionality, I don't know for how long, like forever.
Yes.
But if we have been living in such a dysfunctional world, and we are sort of wrapping up this phase with all the consequences that we're living, What is or are the most important lessons that we need to embrace in order to heal as a world and move forward to another dimension of vibration of consciousness that will be uh, more healthier.
Mm. Well, you're asking a very difficult question because basically you're asking what's the solution to everything.
More or less.
Yes, I like the way you like to ask big questions. And of course, that's a question that is in the back of our mind that the world, actually, the world is functioning better than it used to function, in my opinion. And not only that, because there are less murders, there is less racism, there is less delinquency, there is more health. There are two books by Pinker. I don't know if you've read them. The latest one is Enlightenment Now. Very good books in which he uh, shows that we are actually in a much better shape than we used to. Not that we are in terrific shape now, but the world of 100 or 500 or 1000 years ago was in a much worse shape. There was much more cruelty and danger than there is now. But but there's still a lot of turmoil and dysfunctionality and ugliness. And so, how can we face it? I think I, I cannot give a complete answer because everybody has to find their own individual answer. And I am persuaded that we cannot help if we just fight and criticize. And I think that just being a little kinder can help many people and can make help making it at least a little change. And many, of course, many people would say, "Oh, but that's just a little change." And I like to remember the answer that the Dalai Lama gives to this objection, because he says, well, even little things or little beings can make a big change. Have you ever been alone with the mosquito at night? You know? So even a tiny little
Yes,
thing
can ruin your
can
moment.
help. And anyway, that is the only thing we can do.
Yeah.
So we might just as well do it, of being kind, of creating a beauty, of helping and supporting other people uh, in our corner of the world. And maybe we will just disappear from the face of the earth. But as long as we're here, we can try and do something.
So, like, just to start wrapping up, Piero, caro Piero, I'm just so happy. Well, this idea of the collective unconscious that Jung had it, but also as a Jolie, it seems like to be the collective unconscious, like an energy that surrounds us all, where we get our our mental nourishment to create this life, to co-create this life. So in order to change in the collective unconscious, and so we can vibrate a new awareness, uh, how important is the participation of the awakening of every human being to their transpersonal self, or just to their nature, divine nature, can we call it? I don't know how to phrase it, But how important is the participation of our change in our awareness, our awakening, to affect and impact the collective unconscious so we can start feeding back to us a new possibilities of creating a new world.
Oh, of course, that is the basic factor. And I think if people change and become more aware and become more compassionate, um, and become more creative and work on themselves, the world will change. Uh,
Is that what we need?
I think that is definitely what we need, or at least one of the things that we need.
Mhm. And
Um,
do you think that I don't know how much you have thought about the possibility that we are in a transitional period to change to a change of era, going into as I don't know, the Greeks would say going from the Bronze Age to the whatever age, or going from the Pisces to Aquarian age, or like the yugas or whatever. But we seem to be in a very important transitional moment where we have the opportunity to do giant leaps of change. So, what is your hunch on this process that we are headed, knowing that there are good things that we are now better than before? Are we going to make it in spite of all the damage that we are creating to our mother, common mother, like Mother Earth? Are we gonna be able to make it? What's your feeling about it?
I don't know if we'll be able to make it because I'm not able to review the future. I hope that we will be able to make it. Um, I think we human beings have survived for a long time. You know that there were 23 different human species like Neanderthal and several others,
Mhm.
and they all died except us. We made it, and we are the strongest, most resilient humans, and I think we have the capacity. We will have the capacities to survive in the future. But for this to happen, we have to work at it. Things have to change. Um, I think that throughout human history, people have thought that the present was a decadent time. Uh, Even in the past, the time you're in, tend to perceive that it's decadent. It's not as good as it used to be. That's what many people think throughout history. And um, definitely, I think that there is change. I don't know if I can call it a new era. Maybe a new era is changing, is happening at every moment. Surely there is an incredible amount of change happening all the time that it's hard to keep up with. Um but that change is definitely there. So we have to learn to be flexible, to be adaptable. Like the Taoists say, we have to be like the water that adapts to whatever terrain it flows onto. And it's very humble, very adaptable. Whatever happens, it just takes the shape of where it goes. But it finally succeeds in arriving in the ocean. And I think we have to be like that if we want to survive.
It's quite a challenging time, and I think it is wonderful to be here now because it allows us to be able to see things. What used to be esoteric before is now exoteric, and we are able
Uh-huh.
to connect with more spiritual essence of ourselves through not only information but the experiences. And I certainly hope that we are able to at least leave uh, planted the seeds of consciousness that will bring the future generations into a better place. And I hope psychosynthesis goes on forever because it's an amazing tool. I know that there are people that connect more with a psychoanalytic Freudian type of therapy, or with more like Carl Rogers, more
Uh-huh.
humane, very beautiful way. For me, psychosynthesis was an amazing way to connect with my inner self, with my spiritual self, with that I that you've mentioned so much in this conversation. That is the one that helps me be connected to all the dimensions or all the possibilities. And as long as I am able to open up in my mind and in my limitedness to greater possibilities, I'm able to know better that I that doesn't have the timeless I, which is an amazing way of experiencing life, you know. So I'm very grateful for
Thank you.
your book. I mean, what we may be was such a powerful book, when I was studying, and then I got the inevitable break grades as well. So, those books and the practice of psychosynthesis um, have been amazing, at least for my path, and I know that have helped so many people in this world. It's an amazing thing, but as Ajoli did, living such beautiful way of connecting in this Western world, at least, it's beautiful.
Thank
So
you.
I
Thank you,
was
Gloria.
always, that's for me, that's why I feel it was such an honor that you said yes for this interview, because I've admired you for so many years. I never thought possible that this could happen. So technology is amazing. We are evolving somehow. And this has been so amazing, Piero. And I am grateful for your time. I don't know, se congeló you're congelado. Okay, I don't know if you want to end this conversation with any message that you would like to include for people who have listened and that will listen to this conversation with you about connecting with that I, or connecting with the self, or just becoming more of who they are.
Well, yes, maybe. It's what I would suggest is that the first step is just to do nothing, to just sit there and look out of the window and just be and see what happens. And it's something that cats and dogs do that often. Whoever owns an animal knows that they do that, and it's like recharging their batteries and just sitting there and being silent, not talking, and having some degree of inner silence too, already will make things happen in you.
This is so beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope to be somehow in contact with you again
Sure.
another time. And
Thank you for your enthusiasm, and you're a very nourishing person. I really enjoyed
uh,
talking.
you're so sweet. Thank you so much. And we'll be in contact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a arrivederci and have a wonderful evening.
Arrivederci, Gloria, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye
Bye
bye,
bye.
Piero. Thank you.